You know, Harmon, if you really want to play Game Pass so much, why don't you just get it on that high-end PC that you claim that you have? You know, you can never keep Game Pass out of your mouth. Let's get into this video.
I do think this bears repeating every single time that like Game Pass is brought up in any YouTube video or any like news story or like it's trending or whatever. This service is a complete and utter failure.
Harmon, you're a failure. Game Pass is not a failure. Xbox has came out and said multiple times that Game Pass is very profitable. Something that your precious Nintendo can learn from.
It will not go anywhere. It has not succeeded. It has been like just a giant money sink for Microsoft and has just been this complete implosion of a service that has just ruined entire studios. And this is something that like Microsoft is desperately trying to cover up.
Harmon, can you please name the studios that closed because of Game Pass?
Right. And I think a big reason why like people don't really address how much money Game Pass loses is because like Microsoft's desperately trying to like reach that point where the
Microsoft has sat there and said that Game Pass is very successful, very profitable. So you're sitting there saying that they're not, that is failing. Can you please explain how much money that is losing according to you?
where the business model is profitable, but it simply isn't going to happen. You know, game studios have come out about this.
Can you name one single game studio that came out and said that Game Pass is not profitable?
This is obvious to anybody with any like business sense at all, but
Harmon, stop talking about business sense. You don't even have 2 cents to rub together.
studios are just better off selling their games directly to their consumer than like being part of a subscription model.
That is BS.
Right, this is just the reality of like Game Pass as a concept is that like the studios are not getting their money back by putting.
Pocket Pair has sat there and said that Power has been very successful because of Game Pass. Again, Harmon, you have no idea what you're talking about.
Games on Game Pass. They are basically subsidized by Microsoft to put the games on the service to begin with.
Yes, that is any company. You don't think that Nintendo is subsidizing FromSoft to create that exclusive for them?
And then they are removed after like a small, like a period of time.
Yeah, just wait until Dustbloods maybe goes to the PC. Oh, actually, no. Dustbloods will be on the PC one day. I promise you that one. Whether they sit there and port it or Davy Jones brings it over, it will end up on the PC at one point or another.
It's very interesting kind of seeing like, you know, some of the studios like the narrative versus the reality, because immediately what people will say is that like, oh, we love Microsoft Game Pass. It's done so much for us. But
yes, quite a few companies have said that.
What's actually happening is that Microsoft is giving devs like a huge chunk of change right out of the gate just to put games on the service. Right.
Yes, just like Nintendo gave FromSoft a huge chunk of money to make Dustbloods for them.
Just to get them on there, and then they don't really get a whole lot after that. Like they're
just like being a Nintendo fan. What do you really get back?
Paid for every download the games get, but like what you have to understand is that like most people aren't playing every game on the service.
Yes, I know this. It's not possible. But do you realize that a lot of games on that service have most likely already made their money back and now they're just trying to get more money?
For most people, for most developers, it makes more sense to just sell the game directly to the person who actually wants to buy it.
Yes, but guess what? Not everybody wants to pay full price for those games. That's why we've had rental services almost as long as video games have been on. Well, someone's probably going to clip that. I don't know when the first rental service started, but rental services, I believe, are around as long as I can remember.
Is just bleeding money. Like not only for the studios that develop the games, but for Microsoft.
Well, Microsoft has already came out and said that it's very profitable. So if you're sitting there saying that it's bleeding money, can you please present any type of factual information, Harmon?
You know, Microsoft thinks it's like such this huge, like all-encompassing corporate entity that it can just like throw money away.
No, Game Pass is a very successful, profitable business for Microsoft, and it happens to be the most pro-consumer subscription service you can have for gaming.
That it can just keep bleeding money trying to make Game Pass popular, but like...
They're not trying to make it popular, it already is.
They've already been outdone by Nintendo. You know, like Nintendo Switch Online is a far better service than Game Pass.
Yeah, that's not true, Harmon. Game Pass is a way better of a subscription service than Nintendo is. And they're almost at the exact same thing. When I sat there and looked at how many users were on Nintendo and Game Pass, They both said 34 million, but they sit there and said that Nintendo had more than the Game Pass one did, so I'm assuming it's only by a small margin. Now, Sony has way more.
It makes more sense. It has better games. Like it has this like focus on like retro titles while still.
That's all it has going for it is those retro titles. And they only have 170 games on there. They should have way more than that. Honestly, I think all three of them should have every single title on their subscription service for backwards compatibility. That's honestly what I believe. Now, I do understand why maybe you don't want to put the brand new games on their day one like Xbox does. It would be nice if Sony did that. It would be nice if Nintendo did that. But I'll be realistic and say they're probably not going to do that. But at least after 1 year, they should put it on there.
Continuing to sell the new titles, that do need to be sold at full price, like the Nintendo model of like the same thing is just far superior. But, the Xbox, the Game Pass bros.
Like what, Harmon? Please explain. What titles are so much far superior than the ones on Game Pass? Can you please explain? Your newest ones? I don't even think that the GameCube ones have been released yet. Yeah, it's when the Switch 2 comes out. That's when the GameCube ones come. You don't even have the Wii or the Wii U titles.
Don't really want to admit that, because that would be acknowledging that Game Pass is not competitive, that it can't do anything, that it can't that it hasn't resulted in anything positive in any way, shape, or form, and that
it's way more positive than Nintendo's is.
Contributes absolutely nothing of value to the gaming community. Like, you're paying $15 a month for a game that you can use, that you can honestly just put the $15 into buying.
But then, Harmon, you would have to put an additional 15 and another 15 and another 15. And then on top of that, a 10 before taxes.
How many games are you playing a month?
Well, Harmon, let's look at this. Let's sit there and say you go buy Doom the Dark Ages at $70, which I would not recommend. Well, let's say you do that. You can beat that game in 15 hours. So let's say you beat that in one weekend, which is possible. You can definitely do that. So you sat there, pay $15 online for their subscription service. Then you can go play another game. You can possibly beat probably 2 to 3 games on that platform a month, and you only spend $15 versus having to pay $70 for the full game of Doom the Dark Ages.
Paying for a subscription is more cost effective than simply just buying it,
I don't know if he messed up there on purpose, or because it sounded like he defended Game Pass. You literally just sit there and said a subscription service is more cost effective than buying the game, which is very true. That's why people go get the subscription service. That's generally the reason. That's the whole point of the subscription service. If it isn't more cost effective, there's no reason to get it.
Like, if you're paying like a $70 game, right? 4 months of Xbox Game Pass will pay for that.
And Harmon, the likelihood that it's going to take you more than 4 months to beat that one game is very unlikely. Harmon, you are not helping your cause at defending that Game Pass is not worth it. You aren't making this worse for yourself. You are literally pushing more people to go get Game Pass. You are literally, honestly, I really hope that Nintendo does not see this, because they may want to hide you. You are being very detriment to their platform right now.
And if it's like a big, lengthy RPG, like, you're going to get like 4 months of game out of that, right? You don't need like...
All right, and let's just sit there and say that you beat 2 games a month. Let's say you can play 2 games a month and beat them. With 4 months of Game Pass, that's 8 games versus the one you're talking about.
If you're paying a subscription fee, you're going to have a list of all these games that you can download, and you're not going to have the time to play all of it. Right? You are better off just buying the one game.
Harmon, you don't have to beat every single game on that subscription service. You can take your time. You don't have to play every single one. That's physically impossible to play every single one of those games in a month, or at least play and beat them. Because watch, someone's going to sit there and like cloud play every single one of them just to prove me wrong now.
That you want to play, and then just buying something else when you're ready to play that, whenever that might be. Like the Game Pass model.
Harmon, it is only worth it to buy the game if you can get it for under $20. If it's going to come on like Game Pass, for instance, if you can get the game for less than $20, then it's probably going to be worth it. But most likely, it will never be worth it. Actually, not even most likely. Definitely not going to be worth it to pay full price, especially if the game will come on Game Pass.
At its core, simply doesn't make any sense. At its core, you are better off just sitting and waiting and seeing what getting the games you actually want to get.
And if it's the game that you really want, it's better to get it on Game Pass if it's there than buying it.
Like paying a subscription fee is just for games doesn't make any sense. And it's really something that...
And you have had not a single point to prove your argument, Harmon. You literally have disproven your argument. I didn't even need to do it. You did it all on your own, just in your own damn video, and you still chose to upload it.
Now, the reason Xbox is so adamant at pushing like Xbox Game Pass is that they know that their hardware division has failed.
Well, they're not focused on the console war BS like you want to keep going, because they know the console wars are dying. They're coming to an end.
There's like no recovery from it, that it's a dying brand, that nobody likes it. It's a complete joke. It has like some turbo fans that will continue supporting it no matter what. But like,
yes, just like fans like you when it comes to Nintendo's online service.
Generally speaking, any real enthusiast knows that Xbox is a dying platform. It isn't worth talking about or acknowledging going forward.
I would agree if it wasn't for their Game Pass. Now, when it comes to their consoles, you're absolutely correct, especially them jacking up those damn prices for them. But Game Pass itself is still the best subscription service you can get. Even though there's more people on Sony's subscription service, Game Pass still has a much better value to it.
Going into Xbox's future, this was Phil Spencer's plan, was to create the Netflix for games, that would be on Nintendo platforms. It would be on...
Yes, and they were very successful about it. I actually do take it back. There's one subscription service I think might be better than Game Pass, and that's GameFly, because you can get all the newer titles for $10 a month.
On TVs, it would be available anywhere, and Microsoft would still be heavily invested in the gaming space while still
they are still invested. Why do you think Nintendo created theirs or Sony created theirs? That was because of the Game Pass.
Keep evolving the Xbox brand to its next stage of evolution, right? And it was an admirable effort, to be sure, but the reality of...
Is he going to say of the situation? I haven't heard him say the reality of the situation in this whole video.
The reality of this industry and what Game Pass actually offers and what people are getting out of it, the results are clear at this point. 8 years in, that this...
Yes, and it's still very successful.
This service is not going anywhere. It is not growing. It is not evolving. It is not becoming more profitable.
Game Pass has literally grown 13% since 2023. So you have no idea what you're sitting there talking about.
It's not a good value. It's not magically getting better games. The best games still aren't coming to Xbox Game Pass.
Expedition 33 says otherwise.
It's all just slop, like Power World or Baldur's Gate 3 or what have you. The real games...
Baldur's Gate 3 isn't even on Game Pass.
Are still releasing at full price, not on the service, because the developers for those games know that people will buy them anyway.
All the active users on Game Pass says otherwise.
And that's just the reality of Xbox Game Pass as a service.
Damn it, I thought he was going to say the reality of the situation.
The games that actually have real demand will just be bought and paid for, while the slop that nobody wants, the Disco Elysiums, the
over 2 million people within the first 12 days says otherwise when it comes to Expedition 33, Harmon.
The Deltarunes, the Celestes, they just kind of sit there and rot,
Just like a lot of your precious games. Oh, wait, no, they don't, because Davy Jones saved your entire library.
Xbox Game Pass is a failing service, and I'm very, very tired of seeing people continue to...
I am pretty certain everybody's sick and tired of hearing you say AstroTurf.
AstroTurf this thing into relevancy. I'm so tired of everyone having nothing negative to say about it.
Because there is nothing negative. See, I know what this is all about, Harmon. You're just mad that your subscription service is crappy and you don't have a good one like Game Pass, and you severely want Nintendo to have their own Game Pass. I understand, Harmon. You want something like that. Guess what? Get off your ass and go to Nintendo and get it done.
I'm so tired of everyone saying this thing is such a great value and that it's so good.
I think I'm speaking for everybody, Harmon, but I'm pretty certain we're all tired of hearing you talk half the damn time.
And it just isn't in any way, shape, or form. People really do need to acknowledge the very real problems.
Harmon, the only problems here is how bad Nintendo's online service sucks and Sony's online service sucks compared to Game Pass.
That Xbox Game Pass has. One of the Xbox's best studios, Moon.
I'm pretty certain it's Bethesda.
The CEO for that studio has come out and said that Xbox Game Pass does not help out the studio in any way, shape, or form.
Our World says that it has.
If you want to help Moon Studios, you have to buy their games.
Okay, now I know why he's defending Moon Studios so much. It's the 2D platformer game, Ori and the Wisp. The problem is, Harmon, when it comes to Xbox and Sony specifically, they don't care for those types of games as much. Those platform games like that are more towards the Switch. There was no reason to really bring that on the Xbox. That's why they didn't succeed. It had nothing to do with Game Pass. It was that the game just didn't garner any attention over there.
And the fact that story was just completely buried just goes to show you.
All right, Harmon. Right now, I just looked it up and it's saying on Google AI right now, no, it is not accurate to say that Game Pass has hurt Moon Studios. In fact, Moon Studios supports Microsoft's strategy of making their games available on the platform, including Game Pass, and they see it as a way to broaden their audience. While they acknowledge that playing their games through Game Pass doesn't directly generate revenue for them, they also recognize the potential for increased exposure and sales when their games are featured on Game Pass.
How desperate the Xbox community is to prop up Game Pass and continue to deny reality for as long as possible, because this service is not successful.
More successful than you'll ever be. Well, that's it for my reaction. Let me know down in the comments if you agree with me or not. Please like, share, and subscribe. And until next time, stay vigilant.